Very warm welcome for a personal friend. Gene Rossides has been active, a leader from before the American Hellenic Institute on Cyprus and Hellenic affairs to bring justice to Cyprus, to bring justice and for Hellenic-American relations. When the invasion took place, 5 days after the military coup, on the 20th of July, within 10 days, the American Hellenic Institute was created. Within 10 days, it was created. He focused us immediately on all of our efforts here from the Safe Cyprus Council, coordinated through Aris Anagnos, Peter Kaloyeras, Andreas, Kyprianides, that we worked hard from the very beginning on one principle, and that was a principle that Gene focused us on, and it's the principle of the rule of law. It's a simple principle, but you cannot allow a rogue nation to invade an innocent third party and break American law, and we cannot, as American citizens, sit back and allow that to happen. Mr. Rossides builds that case. He builds that foundation that in any court, in any charter, in any room, still is as strong today as it was 40 years ago when it was first presented. He brought to us the fire, the wisdom, and the guidance that was most important at that time and continues to be today. As it was said about him, Kissinger can run, but he cannot hide. The argument is a strong one, and it's a great pleasure for me to introduce the man that gave us that inspiration and that direction. The Golden Greek from Columbia University, Gene Rossides.
Your Eminence, President and Mrs. Nikias, who I'm very pleased to learn are from my area of Cyprus. They were born where my father was born, in the northern occupied part of Cyprus. I'm so pleased to have you here, Dr. and Mrs. Nikias, and Andreas, and Ari and Nagnos. Great to see you again. I decided that I had to write this book on Kissinger and Cyprus, a study in lawlessness, in order to have something firmly, not just in words that we talk about or a speech or an article, but a book is more lasting. And this book has 4 themes. The one theme that Henry Kissinger, directly responsible for the tragedy of Cyprus in 1974 and its aftermath. There's a second theme of the importance of Cyprus politically, economically, and strategically. Cyprus is a stationary aircraft carrier in the Eastern Mediterranean, close to the Middle East and the Suez Canal. Politically, it's a democracy, an example for other states in the area. Economically, in recent years, it has discovered substantial natural gas reserves in its southern waters of its exclusive economic zone. The third theme is Turkey as the rogue state. And I lay out in one of the chapters in detail that. And the fourth theme is the importance of the rule of law as an essential item for U.S. foreign policy. Let me examine each of these themes. Henry Kissinger, whom I knew, I was Assistant Secretary at the Treasury during the first term of the Nixon administration when he was the National Security Advisor in the White House. He tried to interfere in my efforts at that time when I had some cases that I was doing in trade cases against Japanese imports that were being dumped into the U.S. And I get a note from through Kissinger to the National Security Advisor at Treasury that, gee, can't you go easy on them because the Prime Minister of Japan is coming to see the President and we'd like to tell him that we're going to be easier on him. And of course I said no to that. First, it's that Kissinger actually encouraged, at that time, in 1974, the Greek junta to go in and have a coup against the Makarios government and attempted and to assassinate President Makarios. He encouraged the Greek junta to do that. Over the objections of the State Department, he was Secretary of State at the time, the objections of the Cyprus desk officer and his colleagues on the Greek and Turkish desks, telling Kissinger not to allow the Greek junta to take any action against Makarios, which of course they did on July 15, 74. And then you have Kissinger encouraging Turkey to invade Cyprus. One, he postponed on July 15, they had called an emergency meeting of the Security Council because of the invasion of Cyprus, or the coup in Cyprus. And he had our ambassador postpone that meeting from Monday to Friday. You know, one, it downgraded the issue, took the public publicity away from it. Then he tells our ambassador in Cyprus, go visit the new Samson coup foreign minister. And third, on Wednesday, the 17th of July, he leaks to the New York Times that he, the administration, is leaning toward the Samson coup government. Now this is going to give Turkey the excuse it needs to invade because they had an antipathy to that government. That leak was a front page lead story in the New York Times on the 18th. And Turkey did invade on the 20th of July, as most of you know. Cyprus as a strategic center and a strategic aircraft carrier and use in many ways in the Middle East, plus regarding Suez. There was a period when there was trouble in Lebanon, and the Cypriots, Tassos Papadopoulos was president at the time, arranged to get 1,400 Americans out of Lebanon and safely into Cyprus and then on to their homes. The third area theme is Turkey as a rogue state. I devote a substantial chapter to that and pointing out the various items of Turkey as a rogue state. And Turkey has been, if many of you may not realize, that during the Cold War, Turkey on several occasions actively assisted the Soviet military against the US, allowing Soviet military to go into Ethiopia and other things. Fourth, of course, is the rule of law, and it's an essential item in our affairs and international affairs, and the need for it. And we see it today, and as Nick pointed out regarding the comparison between Ukraine and Russia and the US and Turkey and Cyprus, where's the reaction and the idea of 40 years? Nonsense. And that's one of the things that this organization, and I'm so pleased that the students organization is involved in this, have got to get active again. We've got to do something, and we've got to press the Congress to stop trade and any benefits to Turkey until Turkey takes its troops and settlers out of Cyprus. Now, I tell the Students Association here, let me tell you, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I grew up in the heart of an ethnic community, primarily Jewish, but Italian and Irish Catholics. We had a great upbringing. There's not one Jewish kid that doesn't go to school and write about the problems regarding the Jewish community in Israel. There should not be one American, Greek American, going to school that does not take the opportunity for one of his courses, when he has to write a paper, to aim it at issues concerning our community. And I urge you to do that regarding U.S. relations with Greece, Cyprus, and Turkey. Now, the U.S. role. the U.S. role should be to take action, not just with the Congress, but to take action with the EU, pushing the EU to press Turkey. And the U.S. must publicly state, get your troops and settlers out. We have not stated that at all and have refused to so far. That includes the President administration, it includes the Clinton administration, and it includes Hillary. Those of you who are Democrats and want to work for or with the Democratic Party in the election, you write to Hillary Clinton and ask her to do this, because she hasn't done it. She didn't do it when she was Secretary of State, and Bill Clinton didn't do it when he was president. Take NATO. The U.S., the other item, Congress, the EU, NATO. NATO should have suspended Turkey from the NATO organization, and North Atlantic Treaty Organization, when it invaded Cyprus. It was in violation, of course, at that time, of the fundamental principles of the NATO Charter, and yet they've done nothing. And actually, at that time, one of the Secretary General's name was Luns, I believe, L-U-N-S, and he was actively trying to get Germany to send arms to Turkey when we had stopped the arms, we had the arms embargo legislation in Congress passed. Unbelievable at that time. And I do say that in all of this, as Nick had mentioned earlier, it is in the national interest of the United States to do this. And that was the key. When I set up the organization, we weren't setting it up for Greece or for Cyprus. We were setting it up for what was in the best interest of the U.S. I always objected to one thing when they called us the Greek lobby instead of the Greek-American lobby. A few concluding remarks. The chapter 7 in the book deals with the arms embargo, and I want to say that the part played by Southern California was essential. And we had Andreas, Peter Kyprianides, and he sets up a phone system where the people would call into that telephone and they would be told how to call your congressman and tell him whether to vote yes or no on the next legislation. We had 12 pieces of legislation in the U.S. Congress in September, October, and November of '74. And had the system out here that handled it for Southern California with Andreas and Arianagnos, of course, and Jim Dimitriou and others. Chapter 11 is called, quote, Kissinger, the war criminal, unquote. That quote comes from an article, a book review that a professor USC, J-U-S-S-I, USC, Hellenic wrote in the Columbia University magazine book review of Kissinger, of Nixon and Kissinger, the partners in power. And he had that book review at that time. And in the book review, and I'll read, journalists fawned over Kissinger when he was in office. In 1973, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for negotiating the imperfect end to the Vietnam War, even as Nixon was squirming in the purgatory of Watergate. But over time, Kissinger, the war criminal, came to replace the image of a globe-trotting diplomat, super diplomat. That was from Professor Hellenic, and he is a professor of international law at the Graduate School Institute of International Studies in Geneva. And he's the author, which is a book that you should think about purchasing, and he's the author of The Flawed Architect, Henry Kissinger and American Foreign Policy, published by Oxford University Press in 2004. I thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions.